This is Little Diomede, the most remote inhabited island in the US, sitting out in the middle of the Bering Strait, lying closer to mainland Russia than anywhere in America. It's technically just 135 miles northwest of the already isolated town of Nome on the Alaskan mainland, but that distance is misleading because there's no easy way to cross it. There's no airstrip on the island, nor is there a port, since the land is too steep and rocky. It's essentially a near vertical mountain jutting straight out of the sea, with the village clinging to a narrow beach on one side and cliffs everywhere else. And Little Diomede isn't just a one-off type of place. There's Atka Island, a tiny village 1,100 miles out along the Aleutian chain, sitting in some of the worst flying weather on Earth, where a scheduled flight is less of a guarantee and more of a suggestion. The storms and fog are so relentless that being stranded for days waiting to leave or to arrive is just part of life. Or if we come back down to the mainland US, there's Supai in Arizona. It's technically part of the Havasupai Indian Reservation, which makes it sovereign tribal land, but it's also the most remote community in the lower 48. So, we have to include it. It sits at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, 2,000 feet below the rim, and there's no road to it. To get there, you park at a place called Hualapai Hilltop, and then you walk 8 miles down into the canyon on foot or by mule, or if you can afford it, by helicopter. In fact, it's the only place left in the entire US where the mail is still delivered by mule train. With all this in mind, you can't help but wonder how exactly these places function. And remember, these aren't research stations where a handful of scientists live for a few months a year. These are real settlements where people live year-round, generation after generation. So how does it all work? How is it possible for these people in such remote areas to live? Well, when you're this far removed from the rest of the world, normal rules stop applying. Let's start back out on that rock in the Bering Strait. Little Diomede is the island, and Diomede is the town, home to around 80 people, nearly all of them Inupiat, who've lived there for at least 3,000 years. It's the closest piece of America to Russia. Just 2.4 miles across the water sits Big Diomede, which is Russian-owned, and mainland Russia itself is only 55 miles off. During the Cold War, that stretch of water became known as the Ice Curtain. So how does a town of 80 people survive on a near vertical rock with no docks, no roads, and no airport? Well, Little Diomede isn't really standing on its own. It's held up by a layered web of federal, state, and native corporation support that exists precisely because no business would ever choose to serve a place like this. For example, no airline on Earth would fly a helicopter to an island of 80 people for profit. There's no money in it, so the federal government subsidizes it. And these days it runs through a federal program called the Essential Air Service. On top of that, healthcare comes through a regional native health corporation. The broader support runs through the Indian Health Service and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the land itself is managed through a tribal corporation. The Denali Commission, a federal agency designed to provide basic utilities and infrastructure to rural Alaska, partners with these tribes to fund essential community projects. Strip any one of those away and the island stops functioning. There's literally no running water in people's homes. Water is collected from a mountain spring and just stored in massive storage tanks holding 434,000 gallons. Residents have to manually carry treated water from there back to their homes due to the permafrost preventing pipelines from being installed underground. Now, the supplies are their own kind of miracle. Every summer, a barge arrives carrying bulk goods, and that's usually the only cargo delivery for the whole year. When it comes, the men rush down to the narrow beach and haul everything up by hand, because there's nowhere to dock and nothing to unload it with. That's the year's stock for the Little Diomede Native Store, the only shop on the island. Besides that, to receive any mail, Diomede is one of the only towns in the US where it's delivered entirely by helicopter, weekly. But the food that actually sustains people usually doesn't come off that barge. It comes from the water. This is a subsistence economy, built on hunting seals, walrus, and fish, as well as on whale and crab when they can get it. The hides become parkas and mutluks, and the one thing they sell back to the outside world is carved ivory. That's essentially the entire cash export of the island. There's no industry. The only true steady jobs are the city government, the post office, and the school, which happens to be the most isolated school in the entire US as well.
And what happens when something goes wrong?
Well, there's no hospital. There's a small clinic run out of the laundromat building that handles the basics. And anything serious means a 1.5-hour airlift to Nome, which is also where the nearest police would come from in case of a crime. But you better hope there's no serious weather delays in these moments, or else you're just stuck. In the winter, when the sea freezes solid, the villagers used to carve a runway directly into the frozen ocean for small planes to land on. But global warming has made the surrounding sea ice too thin and unstable to land on. Now let's go 1,100 miles southwest, out along the Aleutian Chain to Atka Island. It's the second westernmost permanently inhabited community in the entire country, behind Adak Island, which is somehow actually more built up and easier to get to. It's an Aleut village of around 60 people, and in a lot of ways it runs the same way as Diomede. The same federal support web, the same subsistence diet of seal and sea lion shared house to house, the same handful of government paychecks from the school, the clinic, and local government, plus a single shop, the Atka Village Store. There is a small local fish processing plant though, Atka Pride Seafoods, which operates seasonally and processes halibut and black cod for the 45-boat fleet that passed through the area. But those boats aren't from Atka itself. Only 9 people on the actual island have commercial fishing permits, but they work the surrounding Aleutian grounds and use the plant as a delivery point during the season, creating a small industry here. And there's actually a 3,100-foot gravel airstrip on the island to make it easier to land, which Diomede doesn't even have, thanks to its history as an airfield for the US military during World War II. Though in some of the worst flying weather on the planet, that airstrip is only as useful as the fog allows. There's also no hospital here or police, so any emergency means a 2.5-hour airlift to, funnily enough, a place called Unalaska.
But again, weather delays are common, so the waiting times are usually much longer.
Atka today is a story of slow, managed decline, drifting from around 95 people at the turn of the century down to about 60 now. So now let's leave Alaska entirely and come back to mainland US, to Supai, at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And here we get a completely different model for remoteness. See, Diomede and Atka are Alaskan villages, shaped by something called the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971, a law that wiped out traditional land claims across Alaska and turned native residents into shareholders of for-profit corporations instead. Supai is the opposite. It's a classic native reservation, the capital of the Havasupai tribe, sitting on federal trust land deep inside the canyon, governed by the tribe itself. The Havasupai have lived in this canyon for over 800 years, and their modern history is a story of being squeezed smaller and smaller. In 1882, after a silver rush brought prospectors and the railroad into the region, President Chester Arthur confined the entire tribe to just 518 acres, the smallest reservation in the United States at the time. Then, in 1919, the creation of Grand Canyon National Park cut off the seasonal migration up to the rim they'd practiced for centuries, trapping them on the canyon floor. It took until 1975 for any of that to be undone, when President Gerald Ford signed the Grand Canyon National Park Enlargement Act, which restored roughly 185,000 acres back to the tribe. So, unlike the others, Supai actually clawed back its land. Today, around 200 people live in the village. And the way Supai gets its supplies is genuinely unlike anywhere else in America. There's no road, so the mail comes by mule 5 days a week, and it's the last official mule mail route in the country, running since the 1930s. 5 days a week, a string of up to 22 mules led by a single wrangler on horseback travels 8 miles down into the canyon. It's about 3 hours down and 5 hours back up, and each mule carries up to 200 pounds, balanced evenly on both sides. They haul canned goods, cases of water, medicine, fresh produce, and yes, even Amazon packages.
The logistics behind it are just as strange.
A contracted grocery company first sends goods to the town of Peach Spring, Arizona, where the post office keeps a special walk-in freezer just to hold frozen food as cold as possible before the next leg in its journey. It's the only post office in the country with one. Then the goods are trucked 60 miles to the trailhead down to Supai, known as Hualapai Hilltop, which is then finally handed to the wrangler to take down.
So why on earth does the Postal Service still run the service to a small canyon village of 200 people?
Well, it comes down to a principle baked into the post office since the 1770s. The United States Postal Service was built to serve all Americans, no matter what. Now, of the 3 places we talked about, Supai is by far the most economically stable, and the reason is tourism. Because that turquoise creek running through the canyon forms a series of spectacular blue-green waterfalls. Thousands of people hike down every year to see them. But you can't just show up. Every single visit requires an advance permit that costs $455 per person booked directly from the tribe, and demand wildly outstrips the spots available. Those permit fees are the engine of the entire local economy, and the mule trains, the small lodge, the single convenience store and single cafe all employ tribal members. It's a remote town that figured out how to turn its remoteness into a product.
Of course, even that has its fragility.
The whole economy depends on one creek and one 8-mile trail, and flash floods periodically tear through the canyon, wreck the trail, and force evacuations, which has happened several times since 2018. There's just one K-8 school, the Havasupai Elementary School, run by the Bureau of Indian Education, but it lacks a high school. So those are the 3. There are different histories, different rules, but if you look closely, they all eventually run into the same problem: retaining young people. See, every one of these places has a school, but there's no college or career track afterwards, so they have to leave. Alaskan teenagers ship out to regional hubs or all the way to Anchorage, and Supai kids must leave the canyon to finish school. Leaving is built right into the life cycle of growing up here.
And the problem is, a lot of them never come back.
The outside world has jobs, peers, possible relationships, and a kind of freedom that none of these places simply can offer. Returning means giving all of that up. And in a village of 60 or 80 people, the math is merciless. Losing even a few young families isn't just a statistic, it's a measurable slice of the future walking out the door. It's a spiral, and once it starts, it tends to feed itself. The battle becomes not just the geography, but time itself, as long as young people are leaving to build a future. But some do leave and then choose to come back. They stay because this is home in a way that a city full of strangers never could be. There's something in that persistence worth respecting. The simple insistence that a place lived in for thousands of years is worth holding on to. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you in the next one.